Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of the end times. This will be my third program on the 47th Super Bowl. And it is becoming very apparent that the most important and most memorable event of the entire Super Bowl had nothing to do with football, but rather it was that power blackout. And the reason is because the power blackout came from the hand of Almighty God. In other words, He was giving us a prophecy of the end times. And that is that the second half of the tribulation is almost upon us. And this second half of the tribulation, Jesus referred to as the worst period of time in the entire history of mankind. And on this program, I want to continue looking at that Hyundai commercial from the Super Bowl, which I believe is another amazing prophecy from Almighty God through His prophet Enoch. And in this video, we see a couple driving a Hyundai past 9 different hazards. And those hazards symbolize 9 of the great woes that we are going to experience during this second half of the tribulation. Now, in my last video, I did mistakenly identify a biohazard truck as a nuclear waste truck. But in any event, it's the last 3 woes which this Hyundai goes by, which are really the worst of all 9 woes. First, we see the hazardous fireworks truck, which has already caught on fire on this lower left-hand part of the picture. And later on, we see this fireworks truck exploding, and it occurs at nighttime. In other words, during the second half of the tribulation period. Now, this fireworks truck could indicate warfare, but I think it is more likely a prophecy of heavenly chastisement in the form of meteorites or comets or something of that nature striking our planet. Remember in Revelation 16:21, where hail the size of a talent strikes mankind. And of course mankind responds by blaspheming God. But I believe this hail is not ice particles, but in fact bits and pieces of the end times comet. Now I believe this end times woe, as symbolized by the fireworks, can be found in Revelation 8, verses 4 and 5. And the smoke of the incense, which came from the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. Notice, by the way, that it is very efficacious to pray to saints. And notice that the prayers go through several hands before they reach the throne of God, showing that intercessory prayer is very important. And the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it onto the earth. And there were voices and thunder and lightning and an earthquake. I believe this very vivid image of fire taken from the heavenly altar and cast upon earth is a prophecy of the end times comet. The next hazard which the Hyundai must get by is a truckload of missiles, and this clearly is an indication of nuclear war. And again, please note this occurs at nighttime, which indicates the second half of the tribulation. Now on the side of this truck carrying these missiles, we see the letters E38. And the Groxt believes that this refers to Ezekiel 38. However, the war in Ezekiel 38 refers to Armageddon. On the other hand, I will admit, it is possible that nuclear war will be a part of Armageddon. As the Hyundai is about to go around its 9th and last obstacle, the woman looks very upset, and we will see why in a minute. She is wearing her 5th item of clothing, which verifies that this is indeed Mary, because the 5 articles of clothing symbolize the rosary. And she is wearing what looks perhaps like a miraculous medal. Let's take a closer look. If we look closer, we see this as more of a generic medal, and I believe that is significant. This represents another type of religious article, and that would be Mary's scapular. The last of the road hazards, or end times woes, which the Hyundai must maneuver around, is a camper, out of which we see two dogs sticking their heads from a rear window. The Groxt correctly identified these two dogs as the opposite of God, because of course God spelled backwards is dog, and they are facing backwards toward the rear. But what do these two dogs represent? Now I am somewhat surprised that the Groxt did not figure out who these slowering anti-God dogs symbolize. They symbolize two of the greatest woes of the end times. They symbolize the two beasts in the book of Revelation. And the two beasts in the book of Revelation are the false prophet and the Antichrist. I suspect the reason why the Groxt could not figure out who the dogs represent, or that the woman in the car represents Mary, or that the truck piled high with 28 items symbolizes the whore of Babylon, is because he is very virulently anti-Catholic, and that blinds him to truly understanding end times prophecy. I know when I do videos on Mary, I always get a lot of dislikes. It is not popular for me to explain how we are going to defeat the Antichrist. But I solemnly assure you, even though there are thousands of videos on YouTube warning about the Antichrist, I am the only one who is explaining to you how to defeat the Antichrist. And we will defeat the Antichrist just as David defeated Goliath. And that's with two major weapons, Mary's rosary and her scapular. So in summary, both the blackout at the Super Bowl and this amazing Hyundai ad are warnings from Almighty God that we are about to enter the worst period in the entire history of mankind. And as always, I do offer a free copy of my book, Revelation Unraveled, for any of you who may be interested. You can write to the address you see on your screen, or you can send me a message to my YouTube channel.